Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcode.com, and this is video number 2. In the first video, what we did is we set up Express, and we installed EJS, and kind of just got reacquainted with EJS real quick. But now what we're going to do is we're going to work with Alpine. Okay, so again, Alpine is this library that we can bring in through a script tag. So again, in our EJS template, I have these hooked up. And this is just going to give us a little extra power to have some client-side power along with our server-side routing. Okay, so basically, you combine the powers here, you kind of have sort of a setup like Next.js where you have access to client-side and server-side routing. But without sort of like the heavy build environment and framework and a lot less of the complexities, just a simple web server. Okay, so let's show an example. That's the HTMX documentation. Let's take a look at the, so for example, basically the way this works is that let's create a H1 that says H1, the below is a block with state. So the way you define state here in Alpine, and again, this is my first time using this, so basically I'm explaining this based on a handful of interviews I've heard with the creator and basically from gleaming on the documents. So you're going to go on this journey with me. Okay, but the way I understand it is you would create like a block of code. Okay, so here's our block of code, and we can give this block of code state, but we do it right in our HTML. We just define this X data property, and we can define in the quotation marks an object, and that object becomes state that's available to this. So we can sit here and say open false, just kind of like in that tutorial or in the docs here. So now see there's a state called open false, and that's available to anything within this div. Okay, so this state's not available to the whole page, just this div. Now let's say that I have an image here that I'd like to show. So let's find an image. Source equals, and we will close the image. Let me just go find a picture. Images.google.com. Let's just find a cool Mega Man picture. Okay, neat. Copy image address. Okay, so we got this picture of Mega Man. Okay, and now I want this picture of Mega Man to only show up when that open variable is true. So then what I would do is I would add another property, and that property would be xShow, which means only show this when open is true. Okay, so see, I'm able to, and this is stuff that we would be doing like React or Svelte or Vue, and we'd be doing it all, and we have to set up all these templates and components. But again, for like necessarily the components are not necessary when you're doing server-side rendering, because you have multiple pages and your website is multiple pages, so each page is its thing. And then instead you're using like partials and other things like that to create reusability. But xShow open, okay, so now this image will only show if the variable is open. So like now technically if I refresh the page here, yep, we still don't see the image. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to add a button so we can show the image. Button. Okay, and then we're going to say show image on the button. Okay, and essentially what we're going to do is say when this button is clicked, so we do @click. Okay, and I'm not sure what the away is for, but let's stick with it. Okay, equals open, and then we just say what we want to happen when that click happens. Open equals false. And I can just make reference to the state directly that's within this block of code. Okay, so actually I want to make it open equals not open. It's just JavaScript, so you can just express JavaScript as you want. So I want to say show image, but I'd like to make it toggle. So open is not open, so let's see if that works. So now let's go back over here, refresh the page. Oh, I'm on the wrong page. There we go. Let's see, like no image. Now if I click on this, oh, nope, that doesn't quite work. So let's see here. Okay. Let's just see if I just change this to true. Does that work? Let's refresh. Show image. That doesn't quite work. So let's think about why. Add click. Let's just make it at click. Let's just do a hard shift refresh. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and that's kind of how it works. And now let's see if I can. Now let's see if I go back and I change it to not open true. Maybe it was just that away thing, because yeah, there we go. And now I can toggle the image. And so see it. And again, that's not something you could just easily do just with server-side rendering, because server-side rendering can only describe the initial appearance. You would need JavaScript, so you'd have to create a script tag and do like plain vanilla DOM manipulation, bring in jQuery, do all sorts of stuff to like create that reactivity. So the idea here is just to give you those splashes of reactivity. Like your server-side templating can already kind of handle most of the stateful rendering of what's on the page, but for the things that need to be like determined on the client side, those few things, there's just a sprinkles of things you can do, and that's essentially what this. So essentially, there's only 14 directives. So these are all xcloak, xspread. That's it. Like there's these 4 directives, and then there's these 6 magic properties, and that's like the whole Alpine framework. And it's very much like in the vein of Tailwind, in a sense where in Tailwind you're basically writing all your CSS in your HTML. So essentially, you bring in Tailwind and you bring in Alpine, you essentially are just writing HTML files again, which is kind of brings us back to the 90s. But again, it's just in a more powerful, reusable format that's a little bit less tedious than what we'd have to do back in the 90s. Okay, if anyone remembers like B tags and I tags and all that stuff. And again, if you mix this up with server-side rendering, and you're using partials and all that stuff, again, you still have you can still make some fairly reusable code. Okay, but see, show just makes it like hide, so it doesn't make that thing not exist or exist. If I did x if, then the thing exists and not exist, so it's actually removing the DOM element and adding it back. And again, this depends on your needs. But now if let me refresh the page. Okay, now it doesn't quite work the same way. Again, I've never really used this before, so let's see here. Remove an element completely from the DOM. Needs to be used on a template tag. Got it, that makes sense, because it needs to clone the template tag. So show would have to be for something that you want to just like disappear, reappear. Okay, XHTML works similarly to xbind, but we'll update the inner HTML element. Okay, that's if you want to bind it to something. Sets the value of an attribute to the result of a JS expression. So that's if you want to bind the value of something, bind a property to a value. So if you want to say something like and just to kind of show you, like, as far as setting the state goes, like where your server-side templating would come in is like, let's say I go back to server.js, and I want to send back colors. Okay, so let's say like color color blue. Okay, color 2 red. Okay, something like that. What I can do here, if I go back over here, I can just sit there and like put that in here. So sit there and say color, and then inject that with EJS. Color. So I'm basically taking the stuff that was passed to the AJS template, and now I'm passing it to the front end via this data property as state. Color 2 equals color 2. So now that has it, and I can do something like let's see here. Um, That's not going to really help. Let's say bind a property. Trying to find a good example of like binding a property to that. Let's do this. Let's do an input of type equals text, and then let's have the value property. And basically what we do is like x. Let's just see an example of x bind, just so I can make sure I got the syntax right. So x bind, there's the attribute equals the expression. Okay. Okay. Cool. So it'd be something like x bind colon value, and then we would say something like, if open is true, then it's going to say color. Okay, and if it's false, say color 2. Okay, and let's see what effect that has. Okay, so let's see here. Does that input show up? Yep, there it is. So if I no, it doesn't really say anything though. Find value, and the show image is not working at the moment. Why? Open equals not open. Let's just do a shift. X bind behaves a little differently when binding to a class. For example, your pass in a class. Example, my var. Okay, really they want me to. Let's say they generally just want you to keep it simple and just bind it to a single variable. So what happens if I say this, color? How's this working again? Let's take a look at it here. Blue is not defined. Oh, because the string is a variable. Let's see here. Blue is not defined. Yeah, I get it. I get it. Color. But it's the string of blue, isn't it? Am I passing the string of blue? Blue color, but it's just injecting it. So in that case, what I'd want to do is probably do this. Let's see here. Or actually, I'd probably want to do this. Doot, 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 doot. Make sure that those are treated as strings. Unexpected string. Where too many quotations there, that's why. Okay, let's try that again. And there we go, blue. So now let's see if I can do that expression again. Let's try that. This is what I did before again. If open is true, then color, otherwise color 2. Okay. And see, that works. Okay, based on that expression, as I click here, it's changing the text in there. So the idea is that like you're writing a lot of that reactive logic. And again, the idea isn't you're writing a whole lot. You could, but the idea is that you're sprinkling in the basic interactivity that you may need on your website. And that's what sort of like Alpine is doing for you. So the idea is you're still leaning heavily on your templating engine to do the heavy lifting of like rendering a bunch of state and rendering a bunch of like items. But if you need those items to like toggle on and off, or you need something like to change values based on some reaction to something else, then Alpine's going to give you sort of an easy way to do that. In the same way that like jQuery made DOM manipulation a lot easier, this is just going to make those sort of light bits of sort of reactive client-side rendering a bit easier when you're working with client-side server render templates. So that's essentially the idea here. It's pretty cool. Again, there's a lot of different directives. I mean, again, this is the first time I've ever used it, So that's you're getting to see me have to go through all like the troubleshooting. But there's a documentation. It looks pretty cool. Now, before, like, when I hear about Alpine, it didn't quite click with me. It's like, how am I supposed to build a whole app with this? But you're not really meant to build a whole app with this. Okay, I was in that sort of spa paradigm. The idea is that this is supposed to complement this particular way of doing things, this server-side rendering way of doing things. So that's that. I will see you guys in the next video. My name is Alex Merced. Again, this is Alpine. We use it in the context of Express.js with EJS, but again, it can be paired up with any templating library. So if you're using Ruby on Rails with embedded Ruby, or you're using Sinatra with embedded Ruby, or you are using PHP, just raw PHP, you could use this. You could use it with PHP with Laravel. Actually, it's really built for working with PHP, Laravel, and Livewire. Like that was really something that the person had in mind. But you could use it in Go with Plush. You could use it in Rust with whatever the Rust templating language is. Point is, like, or you can use it in Python with Jinja. Like, it's something that's just basically going to complement how you do things on the client side, regardless of how you rendered the page in the first place. And that's pretty cool. Okay, that's pretty cool. So that means that it gives it a lot of reach across a lot of the projects out there. It's like, you don't have to be a project that determined to use things in a particular framework. And I mean, theoretically, I guess you could probably even use this when you're using a single page application. It probably wouldn't be as useful of a complement if you're doing like React, Angular, or something like that, because they kind of have a lot of these features already. But it could also just be really nice in just a plain HTML page where you're not using any type of framework. You're just writing raw HTML and you just want to sprinkle in some toggling the page on and off. So that's Alpine, and it's pretty cool. I get it. Okay, there's a lot more to it, but I'll let you guys read the documentation now that you guys have an idea of what it's for. And kind of the logic of it is, again, you're defining like blocks of code, and you can make this state available to this block, and different blocks can have different state and all that fun stuff. But you guys have a great day. I'll see you all in the next video where we'll go over HTMX.